Imagine logging into your brokerage account right now. You are stressed, you have been meticulously tracking inflation rates, listening to talking heads scream about impending doom on financial networks, and trying to perfectly time your next paycheck to buy the dip. You read earnings reports on your commute. You check stock prices while in the bathroom. You are putting in the sweat, the hours, and the anxiety. Now, imagine a corpse, a literal dead person. Statistically speaking, the dead person is a vastly superior investor to you. This is not a dark joke or a philosophical riddle. It is the ultimate humiliation for the hyperactive modern investor. Years ago, an internal performance review leaked from one of the world's largest brokerage firms revealed a shocking truth: the accounts with the highest, most consistent returns belonged to people who had either completely forgotten their passwords or had passed away. Why? Because they physically could not sabotage their own wealth. We are hardwired from birth to believe that more effort equals more reward. If you want to lose weight, you sweat more on the treadmill. If you want a promotion, you stay later at the office. If you want to build a house, you lay more bricks. But wealth creation, true, generational wealth creation, is the only game on earth where the harder you try, the worse you perform. The financial media complex has convinced you that to get rich, you need to execute complex maneuvers. But the brutally simple, deeply counterintuitive truth is this: you don't pick stocks. You don't time the market. You don't hire a guy in a suit. You just stop. The greatest hurdle to wealth isn't a lack of intelligence, it is an excess of action. Most people simply cannot handle the unbearable boredom of getting rich slowly. They want the dopamine hit of a winning trade, the bragging rights at a dinner party, the feeling that they are outsmarting the system. But the system is designed to feed on that exact arrogance. Let us strip away the jargon and talk about the actual physics of money. I am going to give you a number that sounds entirely arbitrary, but it is the mathematical tipping point of your entire financial existence: $300,000. For the average working person, the journey from $0 to $300,000 is an agonizing, soul-crushing grind. It is a period defined purely by blood, sweat, and extreme discipline. It is clipping coupons, driving a decade-old car, agonizing over the price of groceries, and forcing a portion of every single paycheck into a savings account before you have the chance to spend it. During this phase, you are the engine. You are pushing a massive, jagged boulder up a steep mountain with your bare hands. If you stop pushing, the boulder rolls back and crushes you. Your investment returns during this phase are practically meaningless compared to the raw amount of cash you are manually shoving into the account. But once you cross that $300,000 threshold, the physical laws of your financial universe fundamentally invert. You reach what physicists call critical mass, and what astronauts call escape velocity. Imagine you have that $300,000 invested in a broad, low-cost index fund that tracks the global economy. If it grows at a historical average of about 10% in a given year, your money just generated $30,000 in pure profit. Think about that for a second. $30,000 is roughly the same amount of cash a highly disciplined, middle-class family might be able to manually save in an entire year of extreme frugality. At this precise moment, your money has morphed into a second employee living in your house. This employee works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It never sleeps, it never gets sick, it doesn't take vacations, and it doesn't complain. It simply sits in the dark, matching your own grueling physical labor dollar for dollar. From $300,000 on the march to $2 million. You no longer have to push the boulder up the mountain. The mountain has flattened out, and the slope is beginning to point downward. The boulder is now rolling on its own momentum, gathering speed and mass as it goes. Your job description completely changes. You no longer have to push. Your only job is to make sure you don't step in front of the boulder and stop it. Think of this $300,000 threshold as a nuclear reactor. Building a reactor is incredibly difficult. You spend years gathering the materials, pouring the concrete, assembling the core, and mining the uranium. That is your saving phase. But once that reactor goes critical, once the chain reaction of atom splitting begins to sustain itself, the golden rule of nuclear physics applies. You lock the heavy lead doors, you throw away the key, and you do not touch the reactor. You don't open the core to see how the atoms are doing today. You don't poke the control rods because a guy on cable television screamed that uranium prices are temporarily dropping. If you touch an active reactor, you get burned. The financial equivalent of opening the reactor core is panicking during a market dip and selling your assets. It is paying some guy with a slick brochure 1% of your entire net worth to manage the reaction for you. It is trying to move your money from one hot tech stock to another because you think you can time the physics of the market. Your only job, once the system is built, is to let the terrifyingly beautiful math of compound interest do its work in complete isolation. But human psychology violently rejects this strategy. We are emotional creatures deeply infected by something behavioral economists call loss aversion. The pain of losing $1,000 registers in our primitive brains twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining $1,000. When the stock market crashes, our screens bleed red, and our brain interprets this flashing color exactly as it would interpret a tiger jumping out of the bushes. It screams at us to run. To cure yourself of this instinct, you must permanently delete the concept of stocks from your mind and replace it with a tangible, physical asset. Imagine you took that hard-earned $300,000 and used it to buy a beautiful 40-acre farm in the countryside. The soil is incredibly fertile. Every year, you plant seeds, you harvest the crops, you sell them, and you make a solid living. The farm is fundamentally sound. Now, imagine that one year, a severe drought hits the region. It doesn't rain for months. The soil cracks, the crops wither, and the farm looks utterly miserable. One morning, your neighbor walks up to the fence, leans over, looks at the dying crops, and says, "Man, things look awful around here. The economy is terrible. I will buy your entire farm from you right now, but I'm only giving you $180,000. What would you do? Would you panic, sign the deed over, and take a massive $120,000 loss just because the weather was bad this season? Of course not. You would laugh in his face. You know that droughts are temporary. You know that the rain will eventually return. More importantly, you know that the fundamental ability of your dirt to grow food has not vanished, just because a guy at the fence yelled a lower price at you. Yet, when ordinary people see their retirement accounts drop by 20% during a recession, they behave as if their farmland has permanently turned to radioactive ash. They log into their accounts, click sell, and voluntarily lock in a devastating permanent loss. They willingly hand their cheap, fundamentally sound assets to the wealthy, patient investors who are perfectly happy to wait for the rain. A market crash does not mean your wealth has been destroyed. It simply means it is temporarily being priced lower by panicked neighbors. If you don't sell the farm, you haven't lost a single acre of land. You hold the asset, you ignore the drought, and you wait for the cycle to turn. If your own panic is the primary threat to your wealth, the secondary threat is the people who pretend they can protect you from it. The traditional financial industry has perpetrated one of the greatest, most polite heists in modern history. And they have done it through a number that sounds entirely harmless, 1%. When a financial advisor sits across a mahogany desk from an exhausted factory worker, a school teacher, or a mid-level manager, they usually offer to handle all the stressful market timing and asset allocation for a mere 1% annual fee. To the ordinary brain, 1 sounds like a rounding error. You think, I am keeping 99% of my money, and they are only taking a tiny sliver. That's a fair trade for their expertise. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding of financial math. That 1% fee is not charged on your profits. It is charged on your total balance, year after relentless year, regardless of whether the market goes up or down. It acts as a silent parasite, continuously draining the host. Let us look at the brutal reality of the numbers. Suppose you invest a steady amount of money over a 30-year working career. Through the sheer magic of compounding in a low-cost index fund, that money grows to roughly $1.2 million. You are a millionaire. You are secure. Now, apply that tiny 1% annual fee to the exact same scenario. At the end of those 30 years, you do not end up with $1.2 million. You end up with roughly $900,000. Where did the rest go? That single innocent-looking percentage point swallowed $300,000 of your family's future. The advisor didn't take 1% of your wealth, they took 25% of your total lifetime profit. You sacrificed a quarter of your life's labor, handing over the price of an entire house, simply to pay someone to click a few buttons on a computer screen, buttons that you could have clicked yourself for free in a single afternoon. Wall Street builds its skyscrapers not from the brilliance of its predictions, but from the relentless, quiet skimming of the working class's compound interest. You do not need a guy in a suit. You do not need an advisor. You need total, ruthless independence. To truly understand how this plays out in the real world, we do not need to look at billionaires. We need to look at the people living on your street. Let us observe two average men, both 35 years old, both earning exactly the same moderate salary. We will call them the hustler and the slacker. The hustler treats his money like it is a battlefield. He wants to win. He wakes up early to check the Asian markets. He listens to financial podcasts onto X speed during his commute. He is convinced that a recession is always 6 months away. Because he wants to beat the market, he pays an actively managed mutual fund 1.5% a year to aggressively trade his assets. When a tech stock gets hot, he buys at the top. When the market drops, he panics, sells everything, and moves to cash, waiting for the perfect moment to get back in. He is stressed, his hair is thinning, and his mood is entirely dictated by a red or green arrow on a screen. The slacker is a different breed. The slacker barely remembers his brokerage account password. He doesn't know the difference between a bond yield and a dividend yield, and frankly, he doesn't care. Years ago, he read one article about passive investing. He logged into his account, set up an automatic monthly transfer that pulls $500 straight from his paycheck into a broad, low-cost S&P 500 index fund, and then he closed the laptop. The slacker spends his weekends fishing, playing video games, and ignoring the global economy entirely. Fast forward 10 years, they have survived a global pandemic, a terrifying spike in inflation, a land war that disrupted energy markets, and a banking crisis. They sit down for a beer and compare their accounts. The hustler, despite his endless nights of research, his active management, and his frantic maneuvering to avoid the crashes, is up a meager 15%. His returns have been violently dragged down by high advisory fees, capital gains taxes triggered by constant trading, and the fatal mistake of pulling out of the market during a panic and missing the subsequent rapid recovery. The slacker who literally did nothing but play video games and allow a dumb, automated system to buy a tiny slice of global capitalism every single month is up 60%. The slacker did not win because he possessed a superior intellect. He won because he possessed a profound psychological advantage. The utter lack of arrogance required to think he could outsmart the collective machinery of global capitalism. He accepted that he was just a passenger on the train, while the hustler kept trying to climb onto the roof to steer it. Lazy investing, built on absolute apathy and automation, has created vastly more generational fortunes than day trading, crypto speculation, or market timing ever will. This brings us to the ultimate liberation of this philosophy. The financial industry wants you to believe that managing wealth is a lifelong, grueling chore that requires constant vigilance. They want you trapped in a state of perpetual anxiety, constantly consuming their news, their products, and their advice. The truth is that the ultimate wealth-building machine can be constructed in a single, profoundly boring afternoon. Once built, it requires less maintenance than a houseplant. Imagine an ordinary woman named Sarah. She is tired of the anxiety. She is done trying to pick the winning horse. She realizes that true financial power is not about knowing the complex mechanics of the engine. It is simply about knowing how to turn the key. On a random, rainy Tuesday at 2:00 p.m., she sits down at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a laptop. She has 4 tasks. Task 1, she logs into her employer's HR portal. She changes her 401k contribution rate to ensure she is capturing 100% of the company match. This takes 3 minutes. She has just given herself a guaranteed, immediate 100% return on her money-free cash that she was previously leaving on the table out of sheer inertia. Task 2, she opens a health savings account SHA. She knows this is the greatest legal tax loophole available to the working class. The money she puts in goes in completely tax-free. It grows tax-free over the decades, and when she uses it for medical expenses in her old age, it comes out tax-free. It is a triple threat shield against the government. This takes 10 minutes. Task 3, she logs into her old expensive brokerage account. She looks at the mutual funds filled with high fees and underperforming managers. Without an ounce of emotion, she sells them all. She transfers the cash into a single, aggressively boring Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. The expense ratio is practically invisible, 0.03. She fires the vampires feeding on her wealth. This takes 15 minutes. Task 4. She opens a Roth IRA and sets up an automated clearinghouse at transfer. Every month, 2 days after her paycheck hits her checking account, the system will automatically rip a set amount of cash out and buy more of that index fund. She removes her own willpower from the equation entirely. She doesn't have to choose to save, the system does it for her before she even sees the money. This takes 10 minutes. By 3:30 p.m., Sarah's coffee is cold. She shuts the laptop. In less than 2 hours, Sarah has constructed an impenetrable financial fortress. She has legally shielded her income from unnecessary taxes, optimized her asset allocation, eradicated parasitic fees, and automated her discipline. She never has to read the Financial Times. She never has to care what the Federal Reserve does with interest rates. She just has to go live her life. Let the decades roll by and allow the quiet, brutal mathematics of compounding to push her across the $300,000 threshold and into the realm where money makes money on its own. We live in an era that is absolutely desperate to sell you complexity. The internet feeds you a daily diet of crypto memes, leveraged real estate schemes, and options trading strategies promising you overnight riches. They want you to believe that the path from an ordinary paycheck to multimillionaire status is a high-speed, dangerous car chase. It is not. The path to true wealth is watching paint dry. It is planting a small oak tree in your backyard and then stubbornly, violently refusing to dig it up every week to check the roots. The ultimate secret of the rich is not a hidden offshore bank account, a genius stock tip, or an insider connection. The secret is the profound, almost unnatural discipline of doing absolutely nothing when the entire world around you is losing its mind. Build the system, feed the system until it hits critical mass. And then, for the love of your own future and your own sanity, lock the door and walk away.